Captain Daniel Wright stood frozen on the bridge of the Earth Defense Station Alpha. The massive screen in front of him showed 3 silver ships that had appeared without warning in Earth's orbit. They weren't human ships. They weren't anything humans had ever seen before. "Status report," he said, his voice steadied despite the rapid beating of his heart. "Sir," the vessels appeared simultaneously. No warp signatures, no approach vectors. They just materialized, said Officer Lisa Brown, her fingers flying across the control panel. "They're broadcasting some kind of signal on all frequencies." Daniel took a deep breath. First contact. After all these years of wondering if we were alone in the universe, here was the answer, hanging above Earth like 3 metallic teardrops. "Put it through," he ordered. The screen flickered, and Daniel found himself staring at a being unlike anything he had ever seen. Its skin was pale blue with faint markings that seemed to shimmer. 4 large eyes blinked independently of each other. When it spoke, its mouth didn't move in sync with the words that came through the speakers. "People of Earth, I am Selter, ambassador of the Keldorian Diplomatic Court. We come in peace and request an immediate audience with your leaders." Within 6 hours, the United Earth Council had assembled. Daniel sat at the back of the room as representatives from every nation watched the alien delegation materialize on the platform. The translation devices the Keldorians provided allowed for real-time communication. Ambassador Selter stepped forward. Up close, he was nearly 7 feet tall, with long limbs that moved with surprising grace. "We thank you for agreeing to meet with us so quickly," the alien said. "We have been monitoring your world for several decades, watching your development." A murmur ran through the human delegation. President Maria Diaz leaned forward. "You've been watching us. For what purpose?" "Assessment," Selter replied simply. "Your species has been largely ignored by the galactic community due to your relatively primitive technology. This is not an insult, merely a statement of fact. There are thousands of civilizations across this section of the galaxy alone. Not all can be engaged with at once. Then why come to us now?" Daniel found himself asking. All eyes turned to him, but the council president nodded for him to continue. "If we're so primitive, what changed?" The 4 eyes of the alien all focused on Daniel at once. "War," Selter said. "A terrible war that has engulfed 12 star systems already. We are fighting against the Vraxian Empire, a militaristic race that seeks to control all resources in their path." President Diaz stood up. "And you've come seeking our help, our alliance." For the first time, the alien showed what might have been emotion. Its skin rippled with darker blue patterns. "No," Selter said, the translation coming through with unusual emphasis. "We have come to beg you, to plead with humanity, to stay out of this conflict entirely." The room fell silent. "You came all this way to ask us not to get involved in a war we didn't know existed?" General Scott Peters asked, skepticism clear in his voice. "Yes," the ambassador replied. "It is that important." Daniel watched as 3 more Keldorians stepped forward, activating a holographic display in the center of the room. It showed star systems, planets, and the movement of fleets across vast distances. "The Vraxians have conquered 17 worlds in the past century," Selter continued. "Their technology far surpasses yours. They have weapons that can destroy entire continents, ships that can block out your sun. All the more reason we should be concerned," President Diaz said. "If they're that powerful, what's stopping them from coming here next?" The ambassador's skin darkened again. "They already know of your existence, and they fear you." Daniel leaned forward in his seat. "They fear us. Why would an advanced empire fear humans?" Selter turned all 4 eyes to him again. "That, Captain Wright, is precisely why we have come. It is not your technology they fear. It is something far more dangerous." The hologram changed to show footage of Earth's history, wars, innovations, explorations, and disasters. Humans fighting against overwhelming odds. Adapting. Surviving. "It is you," Selter said simply. "Humans. what you are, what you might become if drawn into galactic conflict. And that is why we beg you, stay out of this war. For everyone's sake. Lieutenant Commander Susan Miller hadn't slept in 3 days. Her office walls were covered with alien symbols and translation charts. As Earth's head of xenolinguistics, she had been tasked with decoding additional Kildorian messages that had been transmitted after the initial meeting. She rubbed her tired eyes and took another sip of cold coffee. The more she translated, the more confused she became. "They're not just afraid," she muttered to herself. "They're terrified of us." Captain Daniel Wright entered her office without knocking. "Please tell me you have something," he said. Susan nodded and pointed to her main screen. "The Kildorians sent us their historical archives about Earth. They'd been watching us for longer than they admitted. Centuries, not decades." Daniel leaned closer to the screen. "What exactly are they afraid of?" "Our history," Susan said simply. "They've studied our wars, our rapid technological development, and what they call our irrational persistence in the face of certain defeat." She pulled up footage the Kildorians had shared. It showed Earth's history through alien eyes. Humans fighting against overwhelming odds throughout history, adapting to extreme conditions, and developing new technologies at a pace the aliens found alarming. According to their message, the Vraxians are technologically superior to us in every way. Susan continued. "They've conquered worlds with defenses we can only dream of. But the Kildorians believe that if humanity were dragged into this war, even as allies, the consequences would be catastrophic." Daniel frowned. "But why? What could we possibly do that advanced aliens couldn't?" Susan was about to answer when her secure line beeped. "The Kildorian ambassador is requesting another meeting, this time for a smaller group." An hour later, Daniel and Susan sat with President Diaz, General Peters, and 3 other high-ranking officials in a secure underground facility. Ambassador Xelter and 2 other Kildorians stood before them. "What we are about to show you was not meant to be shared," Xelter said, "but we believe it necessary for you to understand the gravity of our warning." The alien activated a small device, and a hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed what appeared to be a prison of some kind. Inside were humans in tattered uniforms. 5 of your Earth years ago, a Vraxian scout ship captured a small human research vessel near your outer planet Neptune, Xelter explained. "The humans were taken to a holding facility for study. None of your governments were aware. We only learned of it later." President Diaz stood up angrily. "You're telling us humans were abducted, and you did nothing." "We were not in a position to interfere," Xelter replied calmly. "But please, watch." A hologram showed the human prisoners working together. Despite being separated and having no tools, they had somehow managed to understand Vraxian technology. The footage sped up, showing days passing. The humans had begun to dismantle parts of their cells. The Vraxians underestimated them. Xelter continued. Within 14 days, these humans had not only understood alien technology they had never seen before, but had begun to improve upon it. The hologram showed the prisoners creating makeshift tools and weapons from the very technology meant to contain them. They were planning an escape when they were discovered and executed, the ambassador said. The Vraxians were shocked. No other species had ever adapted so quickly to unknown technology. General Peters leaned forward. "So the Vraxians fear us because a few humans almost escaped their prison?" "No," Xelter replied. "They fear you because those humans also managed to send a signal out before they died. A signal containing everything they had learned about Vraxian technology." Susan gasped. "Where did the signal go?" "It was intercepted and destroyed," the ambassador said. "But this incident confirmed what many species have long suspected about humans. You are dangerous not because of your technology, but because of how quickly you adapt to and improve upon the technology of others." President Diaz looked at her advisors, then back to the aliens. "So both your people and the Vraxians want us to stay out of this war because you are afraid we might win." All 4 of Xelter's eyes blinked simultaneously. "No, Madam President. We're afraid you might end it in ways none of us can predict or control. News of the alien visitors spread across Earth quickly. People gathered in homes, bars, and public squares to watch updates about the Keldorians and their strange warning. Global opinion split into two clear sides. Colonel Frank Carter stood before the United Earth Defense Council, his voice firm as he addressed the 20 representatives seated around the large table. "We must remain neutral in this conflict," he said. "We're barely a spacefaring civilization. We've only established colonies on Mars and the Moon. How can we possibly compete with species that mastered interstellar travel centuries ago?" Several council members nodded in agreement. Colonel Carter pointed to the holographic display showing the technical specifications of Keldorian ships. "Their slowest vessels travel at speeds we've only theorized about. Their weapon systems make our nuclear arsenals look like stone tools. Getting involved in their war would be suicide." On the other side of the debate stood Dr. Alice Jackson, Earth's leading expert in international relations. She stepped forward when Colonel Carter finished. "Neutrality is a fantasy," she said. "If the Vraxians are already aware of Earth, they'll eventually come for our resources whether we fight or not. The Keldorians admit they're losing this war. When the Vraxians finish with them, who do you think they'll target next?" The council chamber erupted into arguments. President Diaz called for order. Meanwhile, in a lab 2 levels below, Lieutenant Gray Howard carefully examined the data packets the Keldorians had shared. As a military intelligence officer, he had been tasked with finding anything the aliens might be hiding. "There's something here," he muttered to himself. "Something they're not telling us." He zoomed in on a star chart showing Vraxian expansion over the past century. Their empire had grown in every direction except one: the direction of Earth. "They've avoided us," Greg said, excitement in his voice. "The Vraxians have had opportunities to invade our solar system at least 3 times in the past 50 years, but they deliberately went around us." He downloaded his findings to a secure tablet and hurried to join the council meeting. In another part of the complex, NASA engineer Kelly Martinez worked with a small team examining the Keldorian shuttle that had brought the ambassadors to Earth. The aliens had allowed limited access to the vessel as a show of good faith. "This doesn't make sense," Kelly said, studying the engine components. "Their propulsion system operates on principles completely different from our theoretical models." She ran her hand over the smooth metallic surface that seemed to pulse with energy even when powered down. "According to everything we know about physics, this shouldn't work, but it does. And I think—" She paused, her mind racing with possibilities. "I think we could adapt this knowledge to create defense systems within months, not decades." Back in the council chamber, the debate continued. Lieutenant Howard slipped in and passed his findings to Captain Daniel Wright, who quickly reviewed them before standing up. "Excuse me, Madam President," Daniel said. "I believe the Keldorians are withholding crucial information about the Vraxians." All eyes turned to Ambassador Selter, who remained unnervingly still. "The Vraxians have had multiple opportunities to invade Earth," Daniel continued. "Yet they've deliberately avoided our solar system. Why?" The ambassador's skin rippled with dark blue patterns. "The reason is complicated. We deserve to know the truth," President Diaz insisted. "If you want us to stay out of this war, we need to understand exactly why." Before Exceltor could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. A young officer burst into the room. "Madam President, we've detected an unknown vessel at the edge of our solar system. It's not Keldorian." The ambassador's skin turned almost white. "Vraxian scout ship," he whispered. "They're here." Colonel Carter stood up. "Is this an invasion?" "No," Selter said, his voice trembling. "It's worse. They've come to observe your response to us, to see if what they fear about humans is true." "And what exactly is that?" Dr. Jackson demanded. "That you are the only species in the galaxy who, when threatened, become more dangerous, not less." The Situation Room buzzed with activity as military personnel monitored the Vraxian scout ship hovering at the edge of the solar system. Its sleek, predatory design was visible on the main screen, looking nothing like the more rounded Keldorian vessels. "It's just sitting there," Captain Daniel Wright said, watching the motionless ship. "No approach, no communication attempts." Ambassador Xelter's 4 eyes blinked nervously. "Please, you must remain passive. Let us handle this situation. The Vraxians will likely just observe and leave." President Dias frowned. "This is our solar system, Ambassador. We can't simply ignore an unknown vessel inside our borders. They will see any action as aggression." Xelter insisted, his skin rippling with dark patterns. "Any sign of human military response will confirm what they fear about your species." In another part of the complex, General Paul Adams watched the same feed with growing anger. A 30-year veteran of Earth conflicts, he didn't trust the Keldorians or their warnings. He picked up a secure phone. "This is General Adams. Activate Project Spear. Authorization code Delta 790. Miles away at a secret military installation, technicians received the order and began powering up an experimental satellite weapon. Originally designed as an asteroid defense system, it had never been tested on a moving target. Back in the Situation Room, Lieutenant Susan Miller noticed a sudden change in the Keldorian ambassador's demeanor. "Something's wrong," she whispered to Captain Wright. "Look at the ambassador." Xelter was frantically communicating with the other Keldorians, their skin patterns flickering rapidly in what appeared to be their natural form of expression. "What's happening?" President Dias demanded. "We detect weapons powering up in your orbit," Xelter said, his translated voice carrying what might be panic. "Please, you must deactivate them immediately." Before anyone could respond, a bright beam of energy shot from Earth's orbit toward the Vraxian ship. The weapon hit its target, but the alien vessel seemed barely affected. A small scorch mark appeared on its hull. "What have you done?" Xelter cried. General Adams entered the room, his face grim. "I've taken action to defend Earth. These aliens are manipulating us, keeping us afraid while their enemies close in." "You fool," Xelter said, abandoning diplomacy. "You've just confirmed everything the Vraxians fear about humans." On the screen, the Vraxian ship began to move. It released 3 smaller craft that streaked toward Earth at incredible speed. "Defensive positions," General Adams ordered. "No," Xelter pleaded. "Let us handle this." The Keldorian ambassador activated a communication device and began speaking in a series of clicks and whistles that the translation system couldn't process. On screen, the smaller Vraxian vessels destroyed 3 Earth orbital platforms with frightening ease, then stopped their advance. Minutes of tense silence followed. Finally, the Vraxian ships retreated back to their mothership, which then vanished from sensors. "They're gone," Captain Wright said, relief evident in his voice. "For now," Xelter replied. His skin had faded to a pale, sickly blue. "I convinced them this was an unauthorized action by a rogue element, not an official Earth response." President Dias turned to General Adams. "You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Security, escort the general to detention." As Adams was led away, President Dias faced the Keldorian ambassador. "It's time for complete honesty. Why are the Vraxians so afraid of us?" Xelter seemed to deflate. "Very well. The truth is that the Vraxians have avoided Earth because of ancient legends from their history. Centuries ago, a lost Vraxian expedition encountered primitive humans. Despite having technology that should have made them invincible, the entire expedition was destroyed." "How is that possible?" Susan asked. "The records are incomplete," Xelter said. "But from what we know, the humans didn't fight like any species they had ever encountered. They didn't surrender when outmatched. They adapted, used the environment as a weapon, laid traps, fought at night, used psychological tactics that the Vraxians couldn't comprehend." Captain Wright leaned forward. "You're saying Stone Age humans defeated advanced aliens?" "Yes," the ambassador replied. And ever since, the Vraxians have believed humans possess some dangerous, unknown quality that makes them too unpredictable to confront directly. Captain Daniel Wright and Dr. Alice Jackson didn't have official permission for what they were about to do. After the incident with the Vraxian scout ship, security around the Keldorian vessels had tightened, but they needed answers. "This is a bad idea," Daniel whispered as they crept through the maintenance corridor leading to the Keldorian flagship's docking area. "You heard what the ambassador said," Alice replied. "Primitive humans defeating advanced aliens. There's more to this story." They reached the airlock where a single guard stood watch. Daniel approached confidently, showing his security badge. "Captain Wright, Earth Defense. We've been authorized to inspect the vessel for damage after the Vraxian incident." The guard looked suspicious but stepped aside after checking their credentials. Once inside the alien ship, Alice pulled out a small device that Susan Miller had given them. "This should lead us to their historical archives," she said. "The Keldorians store all their data in crystalline matrices similar to our computers." The ship's interior glowed with soft blue light. The corridors curved in strange patterns that seemed to follow no logical design. After several minutes of navigating the maze-like structure, they'd reached a chamber filled with glowing crystals. "This is it," Alice said, connecting her device to one of the crystals. Susan programmed this to translate and copy their historical data about humans. The screen flickered to life, showing countless records spanning centuries. Daniel and Alice watched in amazement as the truth unfolded before them. "Humans are feared throughout the galaxy," Daniel read aloud, "not for their technology, but for their adaptability and psychological warfare. They learned that unlike other intelligent species, humans evolved as pursuit predators who could operate effectively without rest for extended periods. This made humans uniquely dangerous in combat situations, as they could outpace other species through sheer endurance." "Look at this," Alice said, pointing to another section. "Our ability to form social bonds with completely different species is considered abnormal in galactic society." The records showed multiple instances where human groups had overcome technologically superior forces through what the aliens called irrational persistence and disturbing innovation. Humans would continue fighting long after other species would have surrendered. They would use unconventional tactics that defied standard military logic. "No wonder they're scared," Daniel said. "We don't fight by their rules." Most concerning to the galactic community was human creativity in combat. The record showed humans could weaponize almost anything and develop new strategies that defied conventional logic. "This report says we're the only known species that deliberately trains for asymmetric warfare," Alice noted. "Other species consider it dishonorable or illogical to fight when outmatched. They either surrender or fight conventionally until defeated. But we look for any advantage," Daniel said. "We use the environment, we adapt, we change tactics." They found records of a human resistance force on a distant planet that had been secretly colonized by Earth centuries ago. When Vraxian forces attempted to take the planet, the humans there had used the toxic atmosphere that they had adapted to as a weapon, leading the Vraxians into areas where their protective gear would fail. The Keldorians believed giving humans access to advanced technology would create an unstoppable force. Alice read from the final report. "It's not our weapons they fear. It's what we might do with theirs." A sudden noise behind them made them turn. Ambassador Selter stood in the doorway, his 4 eyes fixed on them. "Now you understand," he said quietly. "Why keep this secret from us?" Daniel asked. "Because knowledge is power," Selter replied. "And the galaxy fears what humans might do with too much power. So both sides want to keep us in the dark," Alice realized. "The Vraxians are afraid we'll join the war, and you're afraid we'll use what we learn to become too powerful." Zelter's skin rippled with dark patterns. "It's not that simple. We Keldorians believe humans could eventually bring peace to the galaxy. The Vraxians believe you will bring only chaos. That is the real war being fought over Earth, not your resources or your planet, but your potential." Daniel looked back at the screen showing humanity's history through alien eyes. "And what do you believe, Ambassador?" "I believe," Selter said slowly, "that the galaxy is right to fear humans. But perhaps, just perhaps, that fear is exactly what the galaxy needs." Lieutenant Amanda Rogers pulled her jacket tighter as the cold mountain wind whipped around her. She and her small team of 4 soldiers had been tracking strange energy readings in the remote forests of North Idaho for 3 days. "Are you sure this is the right location?" asked Sergeant Joe Phillips, checking his scanner again. "Positive," Amanda replied. "The signal matches the Vraxian energy signature the Keldorians provided." They crested a hill and looked down into a small valley. Nothing seemed out of place at first glance. Just trees, a small stream, and rocky outcroppings. But the scanner continued to beep insistently. "It's here somewhere," Amanda said. "Spread out, but stay in radio contact." The team moved carefully through the trees. Private Sam Lewis was the first to notice something odd about one of the rock formations. "Lieutenant, take a look at this," he called out. "These rocks, they don't look natural." Amanda knelt beside the formation. What appeared to be granite from a distance was actually a metallic substance, disguised to blend with Earth's environment. She ran her hand over the surface, and part of it shimmered, revealing a control panel. "It's some kind of hidden facility," she said. "Everyone, weapons ready, but do not fire unless I give the order." She pressed what seemed to be an access panel. With a soft hiss, a section of the rocks slid away, revealing a dark entrance. The team activated their flashlights and moved inside. What they found stunned them all. The cave opened into a large room filled with alien technology. Screens displayed images of human cities, military bases, and what appeared to be psychological profiles of various world leaders. "This is a Vraxian observation post," Amanda said quietly. "They'd been watching us much more closely than we thought." In another section of the facility, they discovered something even more disturbing: simulations of human warfare techniques. The aliens had been studying our battle strategies, from ancient Roman formations to modern special forces tactics. "Look at this," Sergeant Phillips said, pointing to a display showing human brain activity during combat situations. "They're trying to understand how we think." Amanda took pictures of everything with a specialized camera. As they continued exploring, a noise from deeper in the facility froze them in place. Something was moving in the shadows. "Contact!" Private Lewis shouted as a tall, armored figure emerged from a side passage. The Vraxian was nearly 7 feet tall, with features that reminded Amanda of a reptile. It moved with surprising speed, knocking down 2 soldiers before they could react. Amanda fired her weapon, the advanced bullets designed by Kelly Martinez's team based on Keldorian technology. The shot hit the alien's armor and actually penetrated it, something that shouldn't have been possible according to what they knew of Vraxian defense systems. The alien stopped, apparently shocked that its armor had failed. The team quickly surrounded it, weapons ready. "We can communicate," the Vraxian said in rough English. "No more shooting." Back at the Earth Defense Headquarters, the captured Vraxian sat in a specially designed holding cell. Captain Daniel Wright and Dr. Alice Jackson observed the alien through a one-way mirror. "Why were you studying us?" Daniel asked through the communication system. The Vraxian's eyes narrowed. "To determine the threat. To learn if humans can be controlled, or if we must be exterminated." Alice added. The alien didn't deny it. "Your species doesn't react correctly. When threatened, you become more dangerous, not less. When outmatched, you don't surrender. You adapt." Meanwhile, in another part of the facility, Kelly Martinez and her engineering team worked frantically on the prototypes they had developed from studying Keldorian technology. "The power coupling is stable," she told her assistant, Ben Foster. "Let's run another test." The machine hummed to life, creating a shield that the team had designed based on principles they'd learned from the alien technology. When they fired a test weapon at it, the shield not only held but seemed to grow stronger. "That's not supposed to happen," Kelly said, looking at the readings in amazement. "We've improved it. We've actually improved alien technology that took them centuries to develop." She grabbed her phone and called Captain Wright. "Daniel, you need to see this. We've done something the Keldorians thought was impossible." The United Earth Defense Council gathered in the large conference room. The mood was tense as representatives from every major nation sat around the circular table. At the center stood a holographic display showing the positions of both Keldorian and Vraxian ships throughout the nearby star systems. President Diaz opened the meeting. "We faced the most important decision in human history. For decades, we wondered if we were alone in the universe. Now we know we're not. And we must decide our response to a galactic war that has suddenly arrived at our doorstep." Captain Daniel Wright and Dr. Alice Jackson presented their findings from the Keldorian archives, while Lieutenant Amanda Rogers shared the intelligence gathered from the Vraxian observation post. Kelly Martinez demonstrated the prototype defense systems her team had developed. Ambassador Xelter stood before the council, his skin patterns subdued and dark. "I speak now not just as a representative of the Keldorian people, but as someone who has come to respect humanity despite our fears." The alien's 4 eyes scanned the room slowly. "We offer to establish a protective zone around your solar system. We will provide defensive technology and resources if humans promise not to expand beyond certain boundaries for the next 50 Earth years." Murmurs spread through the room as the council members considered this offer. Colonel Frank Carter stood up. "I believe we should accept these terms. It's the safest option for humanity. We gain time to develop, protection from the Vraxians, and access to some advanced technology." He pointed to the holographic display. "The Vraxians have conquered 17 worlds. We've seen what their weapons can do. Even with our unique abilities, we cannot hope to defeat them in direct conflict." Several council members nodded in agreement, but Dr. Alice Jackson wasn't convinced. "There's something we haven't considered," she said, stepping forward. "Why have the Keldorians and Vraxians been in conflict for centuries? From what we've learned, neither side can gain a decisive advantage." She pulled up data from both alien species. Both develop technology methodically and predictably. They follow established patterns of warfare. They've been fighting the same war, the same way, for hundreds of years. Alice looked directly at Ambassador Xelter. "You're not afraid we'll lose. You're afraid we'll win in ways you can't predict. Human unpredictability could break this stalemate, couldn't it?" The ambassador's skin rippled with dark blue patterns. "The war would end, yes, but at what cost? Your species lacks the experience to understand galactic politics. A wrong move could trigger conflicts across thousands of worlds." The council broke into heated debate. Some argued for isolation, others for alliance with the Keldorians. A few even suggested reaching out to the Vraxians to hear their side. After hours of discussion, Captain Daniel Wright asked for permission to speak. "I've been on the front lines of this situation from the beginning," he said. "I've seen both species up close, studied their records, and considered their warnings." He walked to the center of the room. "Both aliens fear us for the same reason. We don't think like them. We don't follow their rules of engagement. We adapt, we improvise, we overcome." Daniel looked around the room. "I propose a third option. Earth will remain neutral, but we will develop our own defenses. We'll establish contact with other species in the galaxy. We'll learn, we'll grow, but we'll do it our way." His voice grew stronger. "If attacked, humanity will defend itself by any means necessary. We won't seek conflict, but we won't hide from it either. And we will never allow any species to dictate our future." A long silence followed. Even the council members who disagreed seemed to respect the clarity of his position. President Diaz finally spoke. "Captain Wright's proposal offers a middle path. We neither surrender our independence nor rush headlong into war." She turned to Ambassador Xelter. "This is our decision. We respect your concerns, but humanity must chart its own course." The Keldorian ambassador's skin had turned almost white. He trembled slightly, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The galaxy isn't ready for unleashed humanity." Daniel stepped closer to the alien. "That's exactly the point, Ambassador. Maybe it's time for something unpredictable in your predictable war." 3 days after Earth announced its decision to remain neutral while developing its own defenses, the sensors at the edge of the solar system lit up with warnings. A Vraxian battle fleet had arrived. Not just a scout ship this time, but 15 warships arranged in attack formation. In the Earth Defense Command Center, chaos erupted as reports came in from all monitoring stations. They'd jumped in just beyond Mars orbit. A technician called out. Multiple ships, heavily armed. President Diaz arrived with her advisors. Captain Daniel Wright, Dr. Alice Jackson, Lieutenant Amanda Rogers, and Kelly Martinez were already there, watching the massive alien ships on the main screen. "Have they made any communication attempts?" the president asked. "Yes, Madam President," Susan Miller replied. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Translation is coming through now." The main screen flickered, and a Vraxian commander appeared. Unlike the prisoner they had captured, this one wore elaborate armor decorated with what appeared to be battle trophies. "People of Earth," the alien said, its voice harsh even through the translation system. "Your decision to develop independent defenses is considered an act of aggression. Submit to Vraxian protection, or face immediate consequences." The Keldorian ships positioned near Earth moved into defensive formation. Ambassador Exceltor entered the command center, his skin almost white with fear. "This is exactly what we warned against," he said. "The Vraxians see your declaration of independence as a threat." President Diaz straightened her shoulders. "Open a channel to respond." Once connected, she addressed the Vraxian commander. "Earth has chosen neutrality in your conflict. We have no hostile intentions toward your empire or any other civilization. We simply wish to determine our own future." The Vraxian made a harsh sound that might have been laughter. "Neutrality is not an option. Your species has demonstrated dangerous potential. You will submit to oversight or be neutralized." The connection cut off abruptly. The Vraxian ships began to move closer to Earth. "They're charging weapons," an officer reported. "Kelly, is the defense system ready?" Daniel asked urgently. Kelly Martinez nodded. "Yes, but it's never been tested against actual alien weapons." "It's time to find out," President Diaz said. "Activate all defensive measures." Around Earth, the new hybrid technology developed by Kelly's team powered up. The systems incorporated unpredictable patterns and psychological elements designed by Greg Howard and Amanda Rogers, based on what they had learned about Vraxian psychology. As the first Vraxian ships fired, the shields around Earth flared to life. But unlike conventional shields, these shifted and adapted, learning from each hit and growing stronger. The Vraxians adjusted their weapons, but the human systems adapted faster. "The defensive grid is holding," Kelly reported with amazement. "It's actually getting stronger with each attack." The Vraxian commander reappeared on screen, clearly confused by what was happening. "Impossible. Your technology cannot repel our weapons." "That's the thing about humans," President Diaz replied. "We don't follow the expected path." As the battle continued, Earth used more than just technology. Special forces led by Amanda Rogers deployed Kelly's modified weapons in unexpected ways, targeting Vraxian vessels from multiple angles. The human tactics followed no pattern the aliens could recognize or predict. The conflict lasted hours, but it wasn't Earth's victory or defeat that ended it. It was the Vraxians' growing confusion and fear. Their coordinated attack broke down as human responses didn't follow any of their war simulations. Finally, the Vraxian fleet regrouped and retreated to a safe distance. "They're leaving," Daniel said, watching the screen carefully. "Not running away, but backing off to reconsider." Ambassador Exceltor stared at the humans around him with all four eyes wide. "You actually drove them back. No species has ever forced a Vraxian fleet to retreat without massive casualties." President Diaz turned to the ambassador. "Tell your leaders we maintain our position. Earth remains neutral, but we will defend ourselves. Selter's skin began to show new patterns, colors that Daniel hadn't seen before. I must contact my government immediately. This changes everything. 1 week later, the Keldorian ambassador returned with a new proposal. This time, he didn't ask humans to stay out of the war or accept protection. Instead, he formally requested an alliance, not to keep humanity contained, but to learn from them. For centuries, the galaxy has feared what humans might become, Selter said. Now we realize that perhaps human unpredictability is exactly what the galaxy needs to break free from endless predictable warfare. Daniel looked up at the stars visible through the command center skylight. Earth's greatest strength was never advanced technology, but rather what other species feared most about humans: our adaptability, our persistence, and our capacity to imagine solutions that no one else could conceive.